Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from the upcoming production of The Cure at Troy at Riverside Theatre. Director of Riverside Theatre and director of this show, Adam Knight, is with us. Adam, welcome back.
Great to be here.
Nice to see you. Aaron Stonerook. Aaron, nice to have you.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
And Tim Budd, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice. I have seen both of you in many Riverside productions, so it's a real treat to get to have you in studio. Welcome.
Thanks.
So this is, Adam, we'll start with you. This is by the Irish poet and playwright Seamus Heaney.
Yeah, so Seamus Heaney in the 1970s and 1980s adapted this play, which is a very old play by Sophocles. It's more than 2,400 years old. And the play is about a stalemated war. It takes place during the Trojan War, which during Athenian times was actually like 300 years in the past. So for Sophocles, he was writing about a very old story. And then Seamus Heaney, this Nobel Prize-winning Irish poet, then took this very old story and wrote about it. And now here we are 40, 50 years later doing this play. So it's a long, long conversation that's involving two of the greatest poets, writers in human history.
And Sophocles, we all studied Sophocles in school. The slightly better known plays like Antigone.
Antigone, Oedipus Rex.
Oedipus, yeah.
And Philoctetes is one of the lesser known ones, but in some ways it was a real departure for Sophocles because he was taking some dramatic risks. Sophocles, as you may know, invented the third actor. So if it weren't for Sophocles, we'd still be just having two-person scenes and everything. But this play really uses the Greek chorus in a very fascinating way. It has really intense dialogue, and it's almost like a real potboiler of this kind of three-person drama, this struggle between Thetis, who's a kind of wounded warrior who was abandoned, Neoptolemus, who was the son of Achilles and is sort of this morally troubled being who's trying to decide between his duty and doing what's right. And then, of course, Odysseus, the scheming, famous Homeric hero who pops up in a lot of these stories, who kind of represents scheming and kind of the ends justify the means.
Oh, okay. So we're trained to think of Odysseus. I always say Odysseus.
You say Odysseus, I say Odysseus.
As a hero. But he is an antagonist in this. Oh, and definitely I want to ask a couple of questions about that. Before we get there, Tim, you, again, this play, the original Sophocles is Philoctetes, which is your character. And you kind of brought this play to Adam in Riverside.
Well, they were going to do it. It was on the season, and I just saw it, and I just became very excited. It was a play I knew, and I'd never done a Greek play, so I really wanted the opportunity to do that. And at the same time, I was looking for something sort of more primal and physical. So it was a nice opportunity, and I just took Adam to lunch and said, may I please be in your play? But perhaps a bit more forcefully than that.
What was it about this play obviously it's been something that's been on your radar for a long time. What was it that attracted you to it?
Well, I had read a novel by a Canadian writer called Mark Merlis, who had written a novel called An Arrow's Flight, which was a modern, version of this story. And it made me go back to the original source material then, and so I found the Heaney version, and I knew the Sophocles version, and I just thought it was a very interesting story. You have an abandoned soldier, living alone on an island for 10 years, and then the people who left him there have to come back because they realize they do need him to end the war. So how do you make amends for a wrong you've done? And how do you then forgive people who have wronged you in order to relieve your misery and get off and change your situation and be healed and go on? So there's a really interesting kernel at the heart of this play that I've always found pretty fascinating.
Aaron, you haven't said that you weren't too familiar with this particular play, but you love Greek theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan, kind of on the theater nerd in me really loves theater forms that are structured, that force you to tell a story with certain conventions, like 2 or 3 actors and a chorus specifically, and seeing how different directors and different casts will approach telling a story within that structure is always fascinating to me.
Most of our listeners probably studied this in school, but for those who hear the word chorus and they think, oh, it's a musical. Adam, explain the function of the chorus in a in a play like this.
So in classical Athens, the plays would have maybe 2 or 3 principals and then a chorus of really they were townspeople or kind of elders who would learn these group roles. And in some plays, they serve as the townspeople. And in this play, they are sailors who are working for Neoptolemus. But they provide a bridge between the action, which is often larger than life and dealing with these kings or heroes, and the more common people, the audience. And so they often comment on the action, they participate in the action, and sometimes they kind of explain what's happening, but they really are an emotional bridge and a thematic bridge for the audience to better understand what's happening.
They kind of, perhaps ask the questions the audience might ask.
Exactly, yeah.
And what then attracted you to this play, putting it on at this time?
Well, you hear Heaney's words from this play quoted often. In fact, I remember, I think it was during Biden's 2020 acceptance speech at the DNC that he quoted this play. And I was like, what is this play he's quoting? And there's some wonderful text about the longed for arc of justice and hope and history rhyming. And it's a play that has often been quoted during times of struggle, during times of uncertainty, when it feels like the two sides are so far apart, there's never going to be reconciliation.
Oh. So not reflecting our current times
So
at all.
it's not really of the now, but, we're doing it anyway.
Tim and Aaron, digging into this, what changed your, maybe upon first reading and then digging into it, what changed or surprised you along the way? Aaron, you first.
On my first reading of the play, you really do see Odysseus as this schemer, as this antagonist. But once we started working on it in the room, I found all of these moments where I think he's legitimately seeking redemption for wrongs in the past. And that, to me, is really, really interesting, trying to find that balance between this is something I've been ordered to do, this is something I have to do, and at the same time, it provides me with an opportunity to redeem myself for wrongs in the past. And that was something that we kind of discovered along the way that has helped me to find the character a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest, as a performer.
Good, just not playing him as a mustache twirling villain.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that. And, Odysseus, I think, has that reputation as the schemer, and one of the things we don't always see is that personal level of it to him, like where it's really affecting him, and that's been a lot of fun to discover.
Tim, same question. What changed or maybe surprised you as you got into this role?
I think I can tell you now, as we're about a week away from opening, that I'm surprised on, what it physically and emotionally what it takes to do this. It's one thing to read it on paper, but I'm dealing with a character who was bitten by a snake on his foot and it's never healed and it's festered and ulcered. So to do an entire show where you're favoring one foot and you have to limp has been kind of physically taxing. How to move around, how to get around. He's not very mobile. And then secondly, he has been bearing a grudge for 10 years. And how you keep that sort of furnace burning inside you, which is sort of driving, the way you feel about these other characters. When will I, get retribution for the wrongs that I've been subject to? And you really got to keep that bellows pumping away.
And then they show up and need your help.
Right. So, and it's, and even at the end too, finding that forgiveness, there's a big change in him. And it's not dissimilar from, say, Prospero in The Tempest, when he forgives at the end. And there's, finding that part inside yourself and helping to show that to an audience, it's been an interesting challenge. And, I'm still working on that. So.
Show opens January 30th, yes? And runs
January
for 2 weekends?
30th. Yeah, 2 weekends through February 9. Tickets are at riversidetheatre.org, like usual. And per what Tim said, the play really is something of an opera. It has these huge emotions. And the designs really reflect that. The audiences are going to see something that they've never seen at Riverside before. The layout is changed. It's 3/4 thrust. Amazing compositions, amazing lighting design and scenic design, some real great surprises and costumes. Really so excited to have audiences experience this very old story in a very fresh way.
One of the things that I love too is when you do the talkbacks, and I know you've got that scheduled.
Yeah,
too.
Miriam Gilbert will be joining us the first Sunday, February 2nd, after the matinee. Professor Gilbert is always great about getting to the marrow of these texts.
Now, before we go, Tim, I happen to know that this is your 70th production at Riverside Theatre.
It is. Can you believe it? 1988. I just moved to Iowa City. I think my first show would have been 89, something like that, 27, 28. Yeah, back in their old Gilbert Street space, and been chugging away ever since.
All right, so well, let's do a little lightning round before we go. Okay. And I know if you like this, there's a much longer interview that you did and posted to the Riverside Theatre website. But okay, favorite show?
I have to go back to the one-man Christmas Carol I did with Tara McGovern playing the violin, and only because that's such a wonderful story. Where else you get a story of redemption like that at Christmas time? And just the audience so much appreciated that story and loved it, and it was one of the few shows I've ever got where people have written letters to the theater and to me specifically about the show. So I have to say that was... something I hadn't expected.
Well, and on that same theme, unexpected, what was the most, unexpected or surprising or, role that ended up being harder than you expected? Does anything come to mind?
Oh, well, I don't know. We did a show called End Days, which was a very of-the-moment play about the end of a woman who was a born-again Christian who thought that the world was ending. Her husband was a survivor from the 9/11 attacks and never left the house. They had a goth daughter. And the audience responded to that show in such a strong way as well. I thought it was sort of a sitcom. I played Stephen Hawking, who was the figment of the imagination of the goth girl who was into science, as well as Jesus, who was a figment of the imagination of the born-again Christian mother. So it was a dual role, and I just was surprised sometimes at the way the audience responds to the things we put out there for them in a way sometimes that you hadn't ever really realized it was possible. It's amazing.
One more. What's one thing about Riverside Theatre you wish more people knew?
Oh, just the variety and the breadth and the depth of the things they do, I think. And even if you go to a show not knowing it, you're almost always guaranteed that the production values and the productions and the performances are going to be of a really high quality. I mean, I've gone to see shows at Riverside and said, well, I didn't really like that play, but boy, it was a really good evening. I mean, they did it really well. So I think people don't realize that there's this small little jewel hiding out in the Penn Mall right now. And if they just climb a flight of stairs, they're in for a real treat and an experience I think that will last with them for months, years even.
Well said. The play is The Cure at Troy, opening at Riverside Theatre on January 30th. And again, tickets on the website and more information, Adam, at
riversidetheatre.org.
All right. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
You can hear The Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:30, on demand at kcck.org/culture, or subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Watch our videos on the KCCK Facebook and YouTube channels. Our producer is Lydia Kilgore. The Culture Crawl theme is composed by Vivian Shanley. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.